Who are your in-laws? What's your wife's name?
Christy Wester.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
Yeah.
Good. Good morning. How are you doing? Nice to see you. Did you have a good holiday too?
Yeah, ready for the next one.
Did you start eating this before you got here?
I was like, wow, that's quite a
kinda
bit.
scary.
I'll definitely share that one.
That's what he just said. As soon as I know someone, I'm taking mine.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have been trying to set up a meeting for the January financial. And I gave them some dates, and they're just trying to make a decision. It's like the first or second week of January. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, as soon as I get that, I'm gonna come over here one day and visit with Robert for an hour or so about the whole thing.
Yeah, he said that you had asked him about like some background, actuarial stuff. I think the training that's offered
Oh, I'm doing that one right now. I've done everything but that one, and that's what I'm doing right this minute. Yeah, and that one's really long, so I'm plowing through it because it takes a while.
Right, but that
That's probably the
thing is
best.
just understanding the definition.
Yes, that's what yeah. And so, yeah, I'm highlighting some of that, so I'll just, that is, it's funny because I did all the training except that one, because it's at the end, so. I don't know. I think we only have a talk.
Okay, well, I think we're at quorum. There's Isada walking in, so let's wait for her and then we'll call to order.
I was drafted to play Santa Claus yesterday for with Kerry Weston. He does this elf on the shelf thing.
Oh, gosh. Have y'all ever been in Rotary? No.
I haven't.
Okay, well, they always do this big thing where we do this thing at Coliseum.
Yeah, I was appointed by the mayor.
It's really
so
beautiful.
since
It's a
I'm
great
elected, then
experience, but it is wild. Because, you know, everybody needs everything right now.
Yeah.
since I was reelected.
And right now, it seems with all the migrants downtown, it's just such a mess.
Yeah.
It's
I
the
don't know if the
worst.
city's gonna have to reopen that center, the
You know, we-
processing center.
We should, yeah, we're gonna have to. Plus, I thought we should just open the convention center and just get it down there for a while until you, it's just horrible. But we need money. So,
Well,
guess what? We need to have that right now.
I think the money comes with the emergency
Find out.
declaration, and that doesn't seem to be.
That needs to happen like
Yeah.
yesterday. What is it?
They declare an emergency, then there's a meeting.
Too bad. It needs to happen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello. Good Thanksgiving. You're gonna eat that all at once. Take it to the office.
Okay, and here comes Mario. Nate's not coming.
That's very pretty.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Yep. Okay. I think everybody is here who's going to be here, so I'll go ahead and call us to order.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is a regular board meeting of the City of El Paso Employees Retirement Trust. Today is Wednesday, December 14, 2022, and the time is 8:36 a.m., and we do have a quorum. Would everyone please silence your electronic devices so as to not to disturb the meeting? Please stand as we observe a moment of silence in memory of Robert D. Andron, who served on the Board of Trustees for from 2008 to 2014. Thank you. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Notice to the public. All matters listed under the consent agenda will be considered by the Retirement Trust Board to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed on the agenda. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the Retirement Trust Board or persons in the audience request that specific items be removed from the consent agenda to the regular agenda for discussion prior to the time the Retirement Trust Board votes on the motion to adopt the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Carl and seconded by Diana. It does require polling. Ms. Valdez?
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Mrs. Hamlet?
Aye.
Mr. Remkes?
Aye.
Representative Molinar?
Aye.
And Representative Salcido.
Aye.
Motion passes. Brings us to item 7 for the regular agenda, discussion and action regarding a presentation of a staff award to Mrs. Karina Chavez.
Mr. Ash?
Robert Ash, Executive Director. I'd ask Ms. Chavez to come forward at this time to receive her award. Going once, going twice. Just a few words about Ms. Chavez. It's my pleasure to join the board in recognizing Ms. Chavez, who currently serves as our administrative assistant. Ms. Chavez is being recognized for her 10 years of service as a staff member of the trust. We recruited Karina from the city's Parks Department, where she worked before joining our staff. While working there in the Parks Department, she worked in customer service and did a number of tasks. When a job opened up with our staff, we jumped at the opportunity to recruit her. Karina is very important in our staff. She plays a very important role. I've mentioned to her several times. She's the first person most people see when they walk through the door and step into our office. She's the one who can single-handedly set the tone for the office visit. And she's very good about greeting people, whoever visits our office, with a kind smile and helpful attitude. A lot of you have come to know Karina because she coordinates committee meetings and board meetings. She's the one who calls you and bugs you about reminding you to come to the meetings. She's our AV tech, if you will, always keeping our AV equipment up to date, along with Adrian. She's also largely responsible for the well-received newsletter that's published twice a year. Administratively, she supports me and Adrian, and I appreciate her ability and her patience with me. I thank you for all your hard work and putting up with me for the past 10 years. And I know the entire staff shares with me in congratulating you on your 10-year anniversary with the Trust. Congratulations.
Karina, on behalf of the board, thank you for all your service.
Yeah.
Great work.
Okay, before we move on to items 8 and 9, for both of these items we have people that want to address the board. So I would like us to consider them together, allow them to address the board, and then after each of them has their chance to speak to the board, I'm going to recommend that we move into executive session because I think we need to consult with our attorney regarding some of the facts and the legal aspect of each situation.
So item 8 is discussion and action regarding the non-county retirement application of Mr. Juan Fernando Ramirez Corral. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Corral.
Good morning.
What is yours?
One, excuse me if since I know the gentleman and he's a little shy and uncertain about himself, so I told him I would help him along. Tell us.
Could I speak Spanish better? It's possible to speak in Spanish because my English is not so good. I could explain better in best way what the situation.
If you're more comfortable with that, go right ahead.
Yeah, sí, está bien. Bueno, estoy aquí para solicitar se me pueda incorporar al plan de pensión. Sé que estoy tarde, pero desde un inicio, desde que dejé mi posición en la ciudad, tenía claro que quería la pensión. Desafortunadamente, durante el proceso se me atravesaron cosas personales que explico en la carta, cuestiones de familia, en el cual tuve la mala fortuna de tener indecisión qué hacer, porque tenía compromiso de ayudar a una hermana que tiene un padecimiento. Empecé el proceso, siempre tuve la intención de hacer el plan de pensión. Inicié el proceso en tiempo, estuve en juntas con Alma. Estuve en juntas con Alma. Desafortunadamente, cuando iba a ser, tenía la junta el 25, 5 días antes, y durante el transcurso en el que teníamos un periodo para entregar los documentos, fue cuando sucedieron los imprevistos personales. Y entonces vine con Alma y le dije que tal vez no me fuera por el plan de pensión. A 2 semanas después las cosas se compusieron en mi familia. Se encontró una manera de poder solventar la situación. Tenía una hermana que le habían operado de columna. Sin embargo, le habían encontrado que tenía que hacer una segunda operación. O sea, ella tuvo una operación a principios del año, en marzo, pero no se componía y tenían que volver quizás a intervenirla. Entonces, en el transcurso en el que yo estaba haciendo el proceso, yo pensé que iba a necesitar ese apoyo que yo tenía de ahora. Cuando ya vine con Alba de nuevo, ya había pasado el tiempo. Yo tenía que hacer el proceso el día 28. Y yo vine con ella de nuevo el día 10 de noviembre, el 10 de octubre. Más o menos, como el 10 de octubre. Y me dijo que la única situación que había ya era pues hacer el retiro o otras alternativas. De inicio le comenté que si era posible hacer algo, pero en ese momento me dijo pues que ya se había pasado el tiempo. Y comencé a hacer el segundo proceso para poder hacer el retiro. Vi que no había otra opción. La semana antepasada todavía le pregunté, ¿sabes qué, Alma, que no quiero hacer esto? Me gustaría tener el plan. Y ella amablemente me dijo, bueno, hay una posibilidad, y esa posibilidad es la razón por la cual estoy aquí. Hice mi carta para solicitar volver o reintegrarme o integrarme a la posición de plan de retiro, Y pues esa es la situación que tengo en este momento. No creo que haya algo más que anexar, son las situaciones que se me presentaron y pues bueno, el caso está, ese es el caso que tengo. Creo que en un momento pensé más en poder apoyar que en mí mismo a futuro. Porque en este momento pues me siento fuerte para seguir trabajando, haciendo mis cosas. Y lo vi de esa manera, simple y sencillamente. Cuando las cosas cambian, ya vuelvo a pensar nuevamente en una situación para mí a futuro.
Muchas gracias.
Esto-
Any translation or anything?
I'm aware of the facts, but we can talk about it in executive session. But for now, does anybody have questions for Mr. Croft?
Gracias.
No problem.
Okay.
No, okay.
Gracias.
Ok, gracias.
And under item 9, discussion and action regarding the request by Julia Oñate to petition the board for the approval of survivor benefits for Marvin Lauer.
Good morning, guys. My name is Pablo Oñate. I'll be speaking on behalf of my mom. English is not her primary language, so
No problem.
Cool. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to share this with you guys. I'm going to read a letter that I think we wrote to you guys. I'm not sure if you guys have been privy to that letter, but I think it most succinctly defines why we're here. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to read it from that. So we're here today because my mom is asking for Mervyn Lauer's share in his pension benefits. They were married initially in May of 1999. He retired from the city of El Paso in 2010, but before his retirement, they filed for pension benefits that same year. Though they experienced a divorce shortly after applying for benefits, they remained living together, filing joint federal taxes together, and lived as husband and wife till his passing this past September. They remarried in October of 2016 and remained married until his passing. The divorce did not intend to dissolve the pensions application that they submitted in 2010, and she is now asking for widow benefits as allowed in Section 2.64.230 of the pension charter, which I think simply defines widow as the surviving spouse. Also, my mom was not informed that the application benefits initially filed in 2010 was not successfully processed, and so she did not have a chance to react and reapply and follow up with her husband at the time. As a widow of my stepdad, Mervyn Lauer, she's asking that she grant her benefits on her late husband's pension based on good cause. And that's the definition we saw in your guys' charter. It says that the circumstances of the unsuccessful application were outside of her control and awareness.
Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So do we have a motion
So move.
to go into executive session?
Second.
So we have a motion by Representative Salcido, seconded by Diana Nunes to enter into executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The board will return to executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code 551071, consultation with attorney, and 551078, deliberation regarding disability applicants' medical records.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
I can hear you, Laura.
Okay, great.
All right, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the short delay. It is 9:08 a.m. on December 14th, 2022, and I'd like to call the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board to order. Raymond, can you do roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Reyes? Here. Mr. Wardy? Here. Ms. Wilson?
Here.
Ms. Byrd? Here. Ms. Stevens? Ms. Enriquez?
Here.
And Mr. Smith is out currently.
Okay, so we do have quorum. Do we have any public comments this morning? Okay. So then I'll move to item number 2, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of November 9th, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? Yes. If you don't have any comments or amendments, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes. Item 3, presentation on the Texas Department of Transportation truck parking implementation plan for the El Paso region.
Yes, ma'am. So today we have with us, and actually a note, since this is our first meeting here in this room, things are a little bit different. I would ask when you're taking votes or when you're speaking to press the button here so that your microphone turns green. Otherwise, you can leave it red. So back to the item. As read into the record, we are receiving a presentation from Brian Comer, who's with HNTB. He's online today. So Mr. Comer, we'll ask you to share your screen, and we'll ask IT to share that. And he's going to walk us through TxDOT's truck parking implementation plan. So Mr. Comer, are you there?
I am here. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So again, as you noted, Brian Comer and I serve as the consultant project manager for the El Paso truck parking implementation. I do want to note that Cale Dreimeyer is the TxDOT project manager through the TPP freight group. And then Kelvin Croker is in attendance today, and he will also be assisting in the development of the plan. So we do want to note that we are just kicking off the plan process, and we just wanted to give a brief update to you all on the work completed to date. There has been a previous statewide truck parking study, and then we want to delve a little bit deeper into our specific truck parking implementation project for the El Paso region, and then discuss next steps. So in terms of work to date, in 2020, TxDOT completed a statewide truck parking study, and the study goals were to improve safety, reduce congestion, and enhance economic competitiveness on the Texas multimodal freight network, reduce undesignated truck parking on TxDOT right-of-way, develop actionable strategies to meet truck parking and basic driver needs across the state, including oversized, overweight loads, identify ways to partner with private sector to meet the state's truck parking needs, leverage technology to ensure the efficient use of TxDOT maintained truck parking, and address parking needs at key truck generators, including seaports and border ports of entry. So building on the study, TxDOT is developing specific implementation plans, and one of the first plans that will be developed is the El Paso truck parking implementation, which we'll cover today. So why truck parking matters, and many of you are obviously familiar with some of these statistics, and this is from the previous statewide study. So there's a significant safety issue, not only for the truck drivers, but also for motorists along our major interstates and the freight network. So during 2013 to 2017, there were 190,240 crashes statewide involving commercial vehicles or trucks, resulting in 2,953 fatalities. So amongst these accidents, 2,315 involved parked trucks, resulting in 138 fatalities and 997 injuries. And these truck crashes are happening because as truck drivers, if they are not able to find suitable truck parking at a rest area or travel information center or at a rest stop, they're often parked on shoulders or at ramps, and obviously this is late at night or overnight, and cars can't see them park there and causes a significant safety hazard. Trucks are also spending a lot of time and money looking for parking. A survey that was just implemented as part of the truck parking availability system noted that along I-10, drivers are spending 30 minutes to an hour looking for parking. And statewide, it was calculated that drivers lose 9,300 revenue earning miles a year, or $4,600 annually, due to lack of truck parking at when they need it, basically. So they're driving around looking for parking. Truck parking is also important for the preservation of roadways. Truck parking shortages lead to trucks parking on those shoulders and ramps, causing hazards, but also these ramps have not been developed to be as parking areas. So these trucks are tearing up the ramps and the shoulders because they were not built or constructed or intended to have trucks park there. And then finally, this is forcing trucks to make tough decisions if they cannot find available parking. So parking in unauthorized or drive illegally, 63% of drivers report parking in unauthorized locations, at least weekly, including 10% of drivers who said that they do this daily. And many of you have seen trucks parked on shoulders or ramps, especially at warehousing and distribution areas, or trucks that are queuing to get to other major destinations. So through this implementation effort, we want to be able to address all types of parking. So many of you may be aware that there's a national hours of service limits on drivers. So there's actually an 11-hour limit. Drivers may drive a maximum of 11 hours after 10 consecutive hours of off-duty. So we have a lot of long-haul drivers, especially that are using I-10, that need a place to park overnight or significant periods of time. Drivers also need staging parking because a lot of connections to warehousing and distribution facilities, those drivers can't be at those facilities until their designated time. So often they're queuing or parking on shoulders or ramps because they cannot be at those locations. We call those just-in-time deliveries, but they need a place to park, a safe place to park while they're waiting for their designated time to go to those destinations. They're also required 30-minute break periods. We also need parking for emergency events. So if there are backups along I-10 due to weather-related events or other types of events, we need parking for emergencies. And then especially owner-operators, a lot of drivers are not allowed to park, within the city or counties. Neighborhood associations also, limit what can be parked within those neighborhoods. So drivers also need a place to park their rig for time off, and these are drivers that may live within the El Paso region. So through the statewide truck parking study, we also heard that drivers not only want a safe place to park, but amenities are very important to them. So through the study, it identified the needs for basic amenities. So they would like, well-paved areas, angled parking, special accommodations for oversized, overweight. They would like basic things like flush toilets and lighting and trash receptacles, safety and security, and then also enhanced vending machines. And what we mean by enhanced is they want to have access to food that isn't just junk food. And then also noted was the desire for enhanced amenities that may include emergency phone notification, a driver lounge, could include green space or dog walking amenities, secure fencing areas, showers, and Wi-Fi, or other types of amenities that drivers said would be good to have at these parking areas. So in terms of the specific implementation plan, the statewide plan identified the need for truck parking within specific areas within the states. But within this plan, we're actually going to identify potentially up to 5 to 7 new parking areas within the El Paso region. And in terms of this, there could be policies and outreach and coordination, and some of these could be TxDOT-led or TxDOT-supported. So certainly the TxDOT-led could include the designation of new TxDOT facilities, or they could be TxDOT supported. That could be a part of partnerships with private industries or the CRRMA or other entities to build truck parking as well. These also could include technology programs that could include truck parking availability systems that provide real-time information on the availability of parking, as well as other technology programs. And then basic infrastructure, obviously, we're going to need access and ingress and egress improvements to these parking facilities and identify the things that, obviously these need to be located within appropriate areas that are conducive to truck parking. So in terms of the project overview and approach, our current study area, initially it was identified that we would be looking at the El Paso TxDOT district. And based upon some input, TxDOT is actually considering expanding that study area also into portions of the Odessa district to make sure that we're going to get that I-10, I-20 split. As well as there's a lot of energy sector traffic that's obviously using 62 and 20 and 285 and other major corridors that are significant generators for truck parking. We also do want to note that we are looking at the broader region in terms of demand. So we do know that there's a lot of demand over in New Mexico at the Santa Teresa port of entry, and that's the port of entry for oversized, overweight loads that have specific needs that's generating a significant amount of truck traffic, including large wind blades that have specific needs. And those wind blades obviously are driving from New Mexico over into Texas to reach their final destinations, and they may need designated places to park or stage. And then we're also looking at truck parking demand that's coming across the border from Chihuahua and Juarez as well in terms of just the analysis itself. So in terms of the plan process, we're just kicking off the study, so we're developing some initial vision goals and objectives. And currently, HNTB is working on a study with Cambridge Systematics, and they're looking at a detailed parking utilization analysis, looking at existing facilities, looking at truck movements, and identifying where the needs are based upon technical analysis. We'll also be engaging the trucking community as well as the public itself through a series of roundtables and surveys, and then we'll have a couple of rounds of meetings. So the initial feasibility planning studies will identify where the needs are and identify potential locations that could be conducive to truck parking. And then the second part of the study will look at location studies and schematic design. That will look at specific locations for the parking and conceptual design for those parking areas. And during that stage of the study, we'll also have an additional round of roundtables and surveys, as well as public meetings to be able to vet those locations with the public. I do want to note that our roundtables include the trucking community, but they also include truck stop owners and operators. Because we want to be able to coordinate them. Certainly, TxDOT doesn't want to duplicate anything that private industry may be planning. So they may be planning some future truck stops within areas. So we certainly don't want to duplicate that effort. And in some instances, we may be able to partner in order to make sure that we have all of those needs that have been identified as the analysis, that we make sure that we have those needs addressed and coordinated. So I do want to talk about, ultimately we want to identify future parking locations and develop conceptual design. And this could include new parking. It could include repurposed or improved truck parking sites. So we already have a number of safety rest areas, and then we have the Anthony Travel Information Center as well. So these could be expansion of existing sites, or they could be new sites. We'll also want to identify appropriate amenities, like we had noted. So this could include enhanced lighting, restrooms, trash receptacles, picnic areas, and vending machines. The analysis will also include traffic evaluations and projections, as well as access improvements. So we'll identify the needs for truck parking, but we also want to be mindful of that they need to be located within appropriate areas. We're also going to do an EJ analysis as part of that site location analysis, because we do know that a lot of the areas that we have demand for truck parking could be within EJ communities. So we want to make sure that these are appropriately sited so that they're convenient to the driver, but we're also limiting any community impacts. And then along with this, we also want to consider signage, technology, and communications so that we let drivers know where the locations of these are. And then we'll also be developing cost estimates and phasing for the parking areas as well. So we do have a significant amount of public and stakeholder engagement through the process. So it'll include a mixture of virtual, but we're going to do a lot of in-person opportunities through these meetings. So we want to confirm the truck parking needs with TxDOT and key stakeholders. We want to educate the public on the need and benefits of parking, and then we also want to document the outreach activities and feedback received, and we'll have multiple engagement opportunities. So obviously we've got our TxDOT leadership and advisory committees, and then we also have our partners, right, which would be the CRMA, El Paso MPO, and Rio Grande COG as well. We'll be connecting with elected officials. Key stakeholders will include truck drivers and dispatchers and private truck stop owners and operators, and in the community itself. And then we do have also analysis that's identified for EJ communities as well, and then we'll be providing regular updates to the media as part of this process. So we want to make sure that we get an understanding of what we're doing and also buying an input from the public and key stakeholders throughout the process. So our schedule, again, we're just kicking off here in 2022. Through the winter and spring, we're going to identify those truck parking needs and identify that through the technical analysis. And in the spring and summer, we're going to start to identify some preliminary improvement strategies. So what we would like to do is, we would like to come back to this group, obviously, and share the results of our initial analysis before we share those with the public and other stakeholders. And we'll be doing the same thing with the El Paso MPO as well as the Rio Grande COG. And then through that spring and summer, we will go out to our stakeholders and then the public and then identify those improvement strategies. And then in the fall, in the winter of late next year, we'll actually develop the conceptual design for those truck parking sites, and then we'll develop the implementation plan in early 2024. So in terms of immediate next steps, we're developing our stakeholder engagement strategy right now and identifying those key folks. And as part of that, we're having presentations with groups like this. Data collection and analysis, that parking inventory and utilization is the first thing. And then one of the things that I do want to note is a significant opportunity that we have is we would like to coordinate any ongoing plans and projects that are currently happening within the region, because these could be opportunities to incorporate truck parking. So obviously those could include the Senate Bill 1308 study, the US 67 Corridor Master Plan, the Presidio Freight and Trade Transportation Plan, State Highway 178 at I-10, Segment 2 downtown I-10, and the Reimagine I-10 obviously is a significant component, as well as future freight connections, including the Borderland Expressway and the Border Highway East study as well. So with that, I can open it up to any questions. So I'm here, and then Kelvin is also here in person.
I think I spent almost 40 years in the transportation logistics, especially at on the international basis. I congratulate you for this study, but look, I think I need to be frank and honest with you. I think your scope is way too wide. I think you need to focus on the basic services, okay? The number one problem is rest stop. When they're out of hours, they need a place to park to take their rest, okay? And yeah, in a perfect world, you have showers, you got vending machines, you got all this other stuff. Then you start competing with the private sector. Most of the time, drivers go into a truck stop because they fuel there, they get a free ticket for a shower. Those facilities are extremely difficult to maintain and require a much high level of maintenance, okay? And I didn't hear anything about the Texas Motor Transportation Association, American Trucking Associations. They have pretty good data, but my only critique of what you're doing, I think you need to narrow your focus a little bit. Let's focus on the principal reason for truck parking. It is safety, but it's parking when they're out of hours, okay? In a secure, lit, well-lit area with some type, whether they get a ticket from a reader when they go in that has their license plate and a photo of the truck license number, just for security issues. But with no disrespect, I hope I can say this properly, you have a bunch of stakeholders that you want to approach in this that have no real understanding of the real issues facing the industry. From a government perspective, I understand that this has got to be a wide encompassing, but I think you need to narrow the focus tremendously. You need to focus on what the basics are that you want to, the major factors you want to, and then look at other amenities if possible. If you try and do too much, like in any project, you don't do anything. So that's just my comment. I think there are some real good things that you put up there, but I think it's way too broad a focus. And
Well,
with
and-
all the
and,
with all the
yeah.
stakeholders you have, I think it's going to be very difficult to come to any type of consensus. And at the end of the day, if it's not driven by the industry, okay, then you're not going to have the buy-in. I mean, I think I need to be real honest with you.
No, I agree with, and I do want to clarify. So the information that I presented at the first part of the study, that was the 2020 truck parking survey that was provided statewide, that they were asking truck drivers, and that was a statewide survey, and that was a very high level, and it was asking about what amenities were important to them.
Okay.
I do want to clarify, this part is the implementation study, and we are focused on the number one thing that was identified as part of that is drivers wanted additional truck parking capacity, right? They want more spaces. They're saying that there's not enough spaces at the safety rest areas, and that the basic things and safety and security were kind of first and foremost within that. So the number one thing that this plan wants to identify is it wants to identify additional truck parking capacity, identify those improvements, and then develop the conceptual design for that. And then we are going to be working through, obviously the key stakeholders are the truck drivers and dispatchers and the Texas Trucking Association, and that's our primary focus. We do want to include the privates just to make sure that we're coordinating, because they can provide amenities that the state can't, right? So we're limited in terms of what we could provide for amenities, and we just want to make sure that we're not duplicating anything. Like if we identify a site, we just want to make sure that there isn't a private truck stop owner or operator that's planning something for that one area. So I do want to clarify that is the primary goal of this study, is to increase parking capacity in the El Paso region.
Okay, but my only issue, okay, I understand the drivers, but it's kind of like letting the inmates run the asylum. The companies that run the trucks have really sophisticated logistic functions and dispatch functions, and they determine where people stop many times and when they stop, to a much larger degree than an individual driver. Truck drivers are kind of like if you go into a grocery store and you start running surveys, you're going to get 100 different opinions, and you'll not be able to come to any type of consensus because the industry is so segmented. You have tremendous differences of types of trucks and everything else, and to try and group them all into one to come to some kind of agreement is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why we're working through the Texas Trucking Association, and also and that's our understanding too, is the dispatchers tell them where they're going to park as well. So, that's why we're trying to, kind of reach out to all of those at a high level. But yeah, we just want to make sure that these are identified in the appropriate locations so that they'll be used.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. interesting presentation. You got some good feedback, and we'll look forward to watching the work as it moves forward. And I do hope that down the road, once some decisions are made and we're in the process of actually executing the construction, the TxDOT will look at the RMA potentially to help facilitate some of the project implementation. We'd like to be a partner.
Absolutely. Yep. Nope. Absolutely. So I think this is, you're uniquely set up to be able to assist, obviously, and coordinate with the implementation of these facilities. So absolutely.
And depending on the financial structure at the state, we might be able to do some upfront bonding and expedite the staging and construction of these with some type of payback agreement down the road. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Thank you very much. And
Good to know. Thank you. And we appreciate the feedback.
Okay, and we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to move on now to item 4, which is discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the execution of a contract for indefinite deliverable professional engineering design services with DEC El Paso LLC, ACOM Technical Services, Inc., and HDR Engineering, Inc.
So as read into the record, we are going forward with the IDC program. This is Ray Mateus, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. Unfortunately, I placed these 3 items on in the hopes that we would get 3 contracts ready. We only got item 4A ready for the board. So I would be asking, and so item 4A is included in your backup, so you've seen that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. Otherwise, I would recommend approval of item 4A at this time, and I will bring back items 4B and 4C.
Are there any questions or comments about the contract that's been submitted as backup? We approved the procurement for these firms earlier, so I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
I second it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 5, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the execution of the following instruments as they relate to the John Hayes Street Extension Project. A, advanced funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. B, amendment to the interlocal agreement with El Paso County. And C, amendment to work authorization number 2 with CEA Engineering Group, Inc.
Okay, as read into the record, this deals with John Hayes, the John Hayes project. Item 4, and these are, of course, all related. I would mention item 4A is the advanced funding agreement with TxDOT that will provide the funding to the RMA to pursue the construction activities related to this project. Items 5B and 5C relate to the currently ongoing design activities. So 5B provides additional funding from the County of El Paso through an amendment to the interlocal agreement we have with them to add $120,000, and that's to provide additional funds for the additional scope that's being added by 5C, which is a work authorization with CEA Engineering Group. They're the firm that's doing the design work for John Hayes. So additional services are being added by CEA to handle some additional scope that was required. And all of the I should say the amendment to the work authorization is included in your backup. Happy to answer any questions, and we have Mr. Sal Alonso here from the county should you have any questions on this item as well. So I do recommend approval of all, but happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve items 5A, B, and C.
I so move.
We have a motion?
I'll second it.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the execution of amendment to work authorization number 46.1 with Atkins North American, Inc. for the Weiler Aerial Tramway Project.
This one is a unique one as well. This one we are increasing the amount of funds to be made available to Atkins as the firm providing the design services for this particular project. On this one, one of the activities that needs to happen is geotechnical services up on the aerial, the location for the proposed aerial station, so up on the top of the ridge of the mountain. Unfortunately, the only way we can get the equipment needed up there to do the work is through helicopter transport. And the helicopter transport service provider in this area has been unavailable due to fires and some other activities that took precedence over our activities. So they're now available, but the cost for them to provide that service has increased by $12,496.83. So what we've asked of Texas Parks and Wildlife is whether they were comfortable with paying this additional fee. They are supportive of it based on some of the backup documentation that we've provided to them. So what you see before you under item 6 is an amendment to the work authorization with Atkins to provide additional funds for the increased cost. Happy to answer any questions, but I would recommend approval of this item as well.
Okay, the helicopter services are for what, Raymond?
They will take up the equipment necessary to do the geotechnical work on the ridge
okay.
of the mountain.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's heavy equipment that can't be
Right.
hiked up. I offered Robert, but he said no.
I'm still going to stress the point, Madam Chair, that all these private sector users that utilize this road that say we need help, they need to pony up to build a road up there. There's no free ride is the best term to use it. I mean, people need to participate. They say they direly need it, then they're going to have to participate to some degree in this project and to help get it done. Thank you.
And the 12,000 is in addition to whatever else was already allocated?
That's correct. So I had that amount, I apologize. Let me pull it up for you. It is included in your backup in terms of the additional amount. So the not to exceed amount has been increased to $1,455,716.24. That includes this new additional $12,000.
That's not chunk change.
Yeah.
That's just moving equipment around?
The 12,000 is just hauling the equipment up to the top of the ridge and bringing it back down at the end of the activities. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the execution of an amendment to work authorization number 4 with Dannenbaum Engineering Company, El Paso LLC for the Rojas Drive Improvements Phase 2 project.
So this item is for additional work as well. Out on the Rojas Drive, in the Rojas Drive area, there's a developer that has made certain improvements, median curb cuts and that sort of thing that requires a slight redesign on the Rojas Drive project that we're developing on behalf of El Paso County. So that is going to add $15,999.91. That is all included in your backup. We also have Mr. Sal Alonso here. Should you have any questions, the county is supportive of this amendment to the work authorization with Dannenbaum. Happy to answer any questions, but would recommend approval of this item.
Are there any questions on this project from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
Second it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
So this item number 8, I'm going to be asking for it to be deleted. There were some changes at the last moment with UTEP, who's a partner with the county on this item, so we're going to ask for this item to be deleted.
Okay, I entertain a motion to delete item 8.
I so move.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 9, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the execution and submittal of documentation of eminent domain authority to the Texas Comptroller as required.
As read into the record, this is required each year, and you may recall this from prior years. There's a statute in place that requires each governmental entity that has the ability to use eminent domain to provide a report on its use in the prior year and any intended uses in the coming year. We don't have any in the prior year, nor do we have any intention to use it in the coming year. So that will be our report for this year. But I do need an action from the board authorizing the submittal of this report. So I recommend approval.
Any questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
I second it.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 10, quarterly presentation, update, and discussion on the following programs or projects. A, Borderland Expressway Project. B, 2013 El Paso Comprehensive Mobility Plan. C, John Hayes Right-of-Way Acquisitions. And D, Pelicano Drive Widening Project.
So item 10A then deals with Borderland Expressway Project. This one, following up from last month, we have developed an outline of activities to pursue those initiatives that were identified last month. So that is underway, and we also have a Borderland Coalition meeting scheduled for this Friday for additional feedback. So I don't know if Mr. Smith has any additional information to share.
That Borderland Coalition meeting will be at TxDOT headquarters, and that coalition meeting will be at TxDOT headquarters, and it's the first one we've had in a couple of months, and all the others were canceled because of no current information. But it looks like progress on the environmental is moving along, and they should be ready to do the commencement of letting out contracts and stuff at the first part of the year for phase 1. So our timing for our outline of the plan that we've talked about in previous meetings is probably good, that we get on it pretty quick. And we can even look at whether or not being able to discuss that at the coalition meeting.
Have we gotten any feedback from any of our communications?
Initial responses from TxDOT, yes, we did. So if you remember the letter that you originally submitted, we've had a follow-up meeting with TxDOT.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's positive to this point.
Okay, good. Item B, the mobility plan update.
So this one, as usual, has been provided as part of your backup. I won't go through it, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll keep moving on.
Is there anything to highlight for the record?
I would mention the item under D, which is Pelicano, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Outside of
Okay.
that, the rest of the projects seem to be moving fairly well.
Mr. Alonso, everything going well from your perspective?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Then item C, just a quick update. This is, so earlier we talked about John Hayes' design and construction activities. This item, 10C, deals specifically with the right-of-way acquisitions we're handling on behalf of El Paso County. These are moving along actually really well. You may recall there's 11 parcels that we have to acquire. Of those 11, we've now transferred funds from the county over to the RMA, through the RMA to the title company for 6 of those parcels. 3 of those parcels we've requested funds, so that means, I should step back, that means then that the memorandum of agreement, all of the negotiations are complete and we're ready to close on those 6 parcels. 3 additional parcels, we've made all of those agreements and we've requested funding from the county, so we're very close to moving to close on those 3 as well. So that's 9 of the 11. The remaining 2 are actually owned by the GLO, General Land Office. So we've been discussing with them, and we've had some progress very recently on those 2, where the GLO is interested now in providing a perpetual easement on those 2 as opposed to allowing for an acquisition. So we're moving in that direction on those 2. So of the 11, we're moving on all of them, and we're getting close to closing on 9 of the 11. So we're very happy with the progress on John Hayes acquisitions. Then that takes us to item 10D, which is Pelicano Drive. I've shared with you the most recent correspondence that we've had with our contractor and their surety, JAR Construction, Inc. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I wanted to add this to the agenda should you have any questions. I did present a PowerPoint to Commissioners Court this past Monday at their request to provide them information and the latest update so that they could share that with their constituents. Followed up that Monday night with talking points that summarized a lot of what we discussed during the PowerPoint. And the intention there, at Commissioner Leon's request, was for their offices to have talking points should they continue to receive questions from the public. I've also offered to field those calls if they'd like to refer them to me or speak to public community organizations and that sort of thing should they have any requests. So we're doing what we can to make sure that they are informed and up to date, and we'll continue to do so.
What is the timeline for compliance? Are we outside that scope yet?
Not yet. So
Okay.
the 10 days began upon receipt. That letter was received last Friday.
Okay. All right, if you'll just keep us posted,
Yes,
that would
ma'am.
be helpful.
Will do. So no action on any of these items.
Okay, are there any questions on any of the items listed on 10 in terms of the updates? If not, I'm going to move to item 11, staff reports. A, status of the fiscal year 2022 annual audit. B, transportation alternative set-aside call for projects. FY 24-25 Sun Cycle Fleet Enhancement Project. C, Thriving Communities Program Letter of Interest Submittal. And D, recent visits with Texas Transportation Commission members, Chairman Nichols from the Senate Transportation Committee, and the El Paso delegation staff members.
Good morning, Robert Studer, Director of Finance for the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. As far as A, we are wrapping up the audit and we'll present to the Finance Committee in early January and then bring it to the full board at the January board meeting. But things have progressed quite smoothly and we're fairly happy with it, and we should have an issue date before the holidays, but then we'll get it in front of the Finance Committee and the full board in January. On B, you may recall we came to the board a few months ago asking for permission to apply for this grant because it did have matching funds, but we were awarded, and we were actually the highest rated applicant for both our 24 and 25 submissions, and so we're going to be awarded about $100,000 each in 24 and 25 to help buy new e-bikes to enhance our fleet. We know people ride e-bikes more, they seek them out. So we did just find out that B-Cycle, the provider and the manufacturer of the equipment, has raised prices for the first time in years, and so we're going to have to figure out what that does, is how many we can buy. But there is a match component, which is why we came to you all to make sure it was okay to apply, but it's exciting news that we'll be getting funds to help upgrade that program.
What's the current cost? What's the current cost now that it's been raised?
I think it went from about 2,300 to about 27 or 2,800 per bike.
That takes us into item 11C, which is the Thriving Communities Program Letter of Interest. So as you may recall from prior meetings, I've been discussing the Thriving Communities Program, which is part of the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is the program where, if we are successful, we will receive support from what are called capacity builders. Those capacity builders then will, in effect, expand the initiative that you all started, whereby we are supporting the smaller communities, San Eli, Horizon, Socorro, and some of the other smaller communities in our area. So this would really ramp up our ability to support those smaller communities. So this letter of interest was submitted back on December 6th. And since then, actually, Representative Congresswoman Escobar submitted a letter of support for our initiative. So we're hopeful about that. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was submitted. And then the last item just deals with some recent visits we've had with Chairman Nichols and the El Paso delegation. Our delegation has been doing a really good job lately of bringing in important transportation officials to El Paso to learn about the region before the session. So we've had Texas Transportation Commission commissioners come and visit with us very recently. Ms. Wilson joined me in a roundtable discussion with those two commissioners. We've also had Chairman Nichols, who runs the Senate Transportation Committee, come down last week, and Ms. Wilson also joined me for a roundtable discussion. That one was a particularly good one because we had a follow-up meeting with just Chairman Nichols, the RMA, and the MPO, and we were able to share a lot of information, a lot of good information about this particular RMA, how unique we are in some of the initiatives we have and some of the progress that we've made over the years, and he seemed very interested in what we've been doing. And then lastly, I'm following up with our delegation. I've got scheduled meetings this week into next, speaking with each of our delegations and most importantly with their staff to make sure that they know what we're up to, what we're looking for in this next session, and making that connection so they know we're available should things come up during the session. So just wanted to brief you all, make sure you knew we were out there, making sure everybody knows what we're up to and spreading the good word about this RMA. But that's all I have.
The great thing about Senator Nichols is he was involved in international commerce before he
Yes.
went into public office. So he has a really firm understanding of international business and especially border issues. So it's a real plus for us.
He was very engaging, I thought. And also very empathetic to some of the challenges, particularly with the smaller communities having to come up with the local matches for some of these dollars. So we talked about some different strategies with him that they might look at. So we'll see how that goes. Any need to go into executive session?
No, ma'am.
Are there any other questions from the board before we adjourn? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second it.
We have motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much. I wish everyone a happy holiday and look forward to a prosperous 2023. The time is 9:54 a.m. and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
To the volatility is just huge. Today, Alex pointed to the Fed meeting. It's the second day of their meeting. I think their Fed statement is probably going to have more impact than the 50 basis point increase that everyone's expecting. And that'll probably follow through the end of the year. Typically, we like to see Santa Claus rallies at the end of December, mid-December. I think this Fed statement can throw cold water on it or cause things to really zoom up. So 12 o'clock, right around there, they'll make that statement. And so markets may move at that point. But volatility has been elevated.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Yeah,
See you
on behalf
next year.
of Cal and I just want to wish everyone Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, wonderful New Year.
Merry Christmas.
We really enjoy working with you all. Look forward to much more to come in 2023. So, thank you all.
We look forward to it too.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 11, discussion and action regarding approving a resolution amending the trust investment policy statement to amend the rebalancing provisions and authorizing the investment of laddered bonds.
Robert?
Robert Ash, Executive Director, Legal Advisor. The item before you, I wanted to go over very clearly, is an amendment that is being proposed by the Investment Committee and Callan. Callan revised the investment policy statement that's up for your adoption today and approval to include a new asset called laddered bonds. We've actually had this in the past, but after considering the effect of short-term interest rates and the inversion in the yield curve, the investment committee, and Carl can correct me on this, thought it might be beneficial to take advantage of that dislocation in the market and invest in some short-term investments that'll take advantage of the short end of the yield curve, which is basically yielding about 4% on the 1 and 2 year treasuries. The amendment before you today would allocate 20% of the fixed income portfolio to a laddered bond portfolio with the idea that we would go out and buy treasuries, approximate amount of $5 million for each tranche for 8 tranches spreading out over a 2 year period in 3-month increments. And the yield on that effectively will be probably between 3 and 4%. And it'll be used to fund cash needs rather than selling equities at this time to fund our negative cash flow. The idea was get a lot more money than we can make in our short-term investment fund at the custodial bank. by doing this laddered bond portfolio. And holding to maturity is the idea, where if we see a markedly decline in interest rates where we can sell these at a profit, you can always do that. The IPS amendment is very specific in that you are authorizing staff to make these trades. We're not hiring an investment manager. We're going out and we would buy through the custodial bank's brokerage firm treasuries in the approximate amount of $5 million one time in 3-month increments, and then hold to maturity. And so the one thing that is different is you're authorizing staff to actually make these trades. In doing so, the staff's plan is to bounce this off the city and see what they're getting for similar securities. As you know, when you buy treasuries or any kind of bond, the commission is the difference between the bid and the ask price, and so we'd be using that as a mechanism to verify that the costs are reasonable. So that is the majority. It changes our asset allocation provisions of the investment policy statement. It provides for this specific type of investment, and this is being done more on a tactical basis rather than strategic. So the idea is when the yield curve does get back to a more normal shape, that we would go back and invest again in the ag index, which has a longer duration than the short-term maturities. So I don't know if Callan has any comments, but you have a red-lined IPS in front of you that you can see where those changes have been made and proposed. So Alex, do you have any comments?
I might just add, this was the culmination of months of discussion at the investment committee level on how to respond to this short-term anomaly in the market, where not only is the yield curve inverted, but rates have risen so sharply this year. Everyone knew that would have a negative resulting impact on the bond portfolio. Was there anything that could be done to kind of mitigate that risk, to lessen that risk, to help with the cash flow needs of the trust? And so, the committee evaluated many different strategies. Ultimately, this one, I think, made most sense from Callan's view, from the committee's view. We view it as, very low risk, also as a very effective cash management tool. Lessens the need, as Robert mentioned, to sell assets in these very volatile market. And we don't expect it to persist for a very long time. You're really capturing a short-term, opportunity in the market. And that's really why we view this as more tactical in nature, and not something that's part of your longer-term strategic asset allocation.
So if I could just clarify a few things for the record. We're going to be taking $40 million and we're going to be investing it in a series of short-term treasury securities that are basically going to mature each succeeding quarter after the investment. And then as they mature, and we get the principal plus the interest back, that will go toward the cash needs of the plan, paying retirees, expenses, et cetera, not necessarily a reinvestment. Correct. So essentially we're taking the cash needs of the plan for the next 2 years, investing them in this laddered bond portfolio to take advantage of the good interest rates on it. And that's kind of the simple version.
Are there any penalties when we withdraw the cash?
So Robert Ash, Executive Director. To Mr. Kerr's statement, we anticipate that this will satisfy the cash needs, but we have some private equity commitments out there, and if we get some large commitments, we may have to raise additional cash. But this is kind of what we're feeling at this point. It's the average amount. As far as penalties or commission costs, I guess, we're looking at crossing opportunities with Mellon Capital right now to reduce those costs. There is typically a cost, but it shouldn't be significant to the amount that we're trading and the types of trades that are happening. Index funds trade, they're very liquid, trade very efficiently. So the cost wouldn't be too much. And again, with the crossing opportunity, that may be zero as far as getting out if we can take advantage of that. So very, very low.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank the committee, Robert and Callan. This discussion had been going on for many months, and it's a creative yet sound mechanism to take advantage of current interest rates and cover our cash needs as we anticipate them, and not lose as much as we would in the current fixed income portfolio based on where we stand with the inverted yield curve. So the committee does recommend the adjustment to the policy statement.
This does cover the projected staff needs that you're looking at for the next 2 years, right?
Right now, we're running about $3 million negative cash flow. And that's the difference between the contributions coming in and the benefit and administrative costs going out. Now, we also get capital calls from our private equity managers. We can't anticipate what those will be. We also get distributions coming in from them. And so we work with Callan typically on how to invest those or deploy those and how we fund the capital calls. Typically, we've taken it out of the cash account, but there may be times when we want to sell equities or whatever. And we've clarified that with this investment policy statement, is you're authorizing staff to work with Callan to figure out those cash flows on distributions and rebalancing. It's kind of what we've done in the past, but we clarified that with this investment policy statement amendment.
Based on what's happening now, you think the 40 million is inadequate?
For the regular costs, yes. Again, if we get a capital call of $20 million, it's not going to cover that. But for our typical expenses, I think it will.
Well, we would address that in a rebalancing request.
Okay.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
So I move to approve the resolution as recommended by the investment committee.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Carl and seconded by Mrs. Hamlin. It does require polling. Ms. Valdez?
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Mrs. Hamlin?
Aye.
Mr. Rimkus?
Aye.
Representative Molinar?
Aye.
And Representative Salcido?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to item 12, discussion and action regarding the approval of a technology allowance policy.
Mr. Ash?
Robert Ash, Executive Director. Before you today is a technology allowance policy. Back in 2015, the board passed a motion that authorized the reimbursement of $150 every 5 years for a tablet or similar device that would be used by the trustees to access the agenda and backup material. This happened when we went to Board Pack as far as a technology tool for purposes of reviewing agenda backup. The ASC and the Executive Committee reviewed that motion, decided that probably it's a good time to come forward with a policy and an amendment to the original motion. The policy that's being proposed would authorize the purchase of a laptop, tablet, or similar device, but not mobile phones and not wearables and not fees associated with it, on a one-time basis every 5 years in an amount up to $300. And so the purchase would be made by the trustee. It would be reimbursed up to $300 by the trust. Again, a one-time reimbursement payment by the trust, and it would come out of your fiduciary education and training budget that we've already budgeted. So that's what's being proposed at this time.
Any comments from the board? Questions?
It was recommended by the Executive Committee and ASC.
So I move to approve the technology allowance policy as recommended by the Administrative Services Committee.
Second.
The new one's every 3 years.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Carl, seconded by Representative Molinar. Does require polling. Ms. Valdez?
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Mrs. Nunez?
Aye.
Mrs. Hamlin?
Aye.
Mr. Rimkus?
Aye.
Representative Molinar?
Aye.
And Representative Salcido?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 13, discussion and action regarding the approval of a succession plan for the position of Executive Director.
David, do you want to pull up the presentation? Robert Ash, Executive Director. One of our goals in the strategic plan was to bring forward a succession plan, and we've been working on this for some time. we have a plan that we've developed. It's not a policy, but merely a plan. And we shared this with the executive committee and the ASC. And so I wanted to go over the 8-step process that the plan entails. Again, this is specifically for the position of executive director. Should I retire, leave, be terminated somehow? The board was always concerned about how we go about getting a replacement to step in. And so I wanted to go through this plan and seek your approval at the end. Again, it's an 8-step process. The strategic plan under one of our strategies says that we're going to develop this plan. And so by approving this plan, you'll take one step forward in meeting your strategic plan goals. So again, this was reviewed by the ASC and the executive committee. The ASC reviewed and recommended the draft succession plan. And in doing so, they asked for some documents to be included or drafted that would help the board in its process of finding a replacement for the executive director. And some of those things were an RFP for professional search, executive search services. And so we've developed a draft RFP for that purpose. And we also have a job description that was reviewed, and you have another agenda item on regarding an amendment to the executive director's job description. And so they wanted those approached, both of those attached to the succession plan, and those have been worked up at this point. So here's the plan outline. It's 8 steps. The first step is notice, and obviously you can't replace the executive director unless they give some type of notice that they're resigning or they're being terminated. And so obviously as much notice as possible is desired if the incumbent is in place. And soon after the receipt of the notice, the board chairman will be provided that notice and will inform the board and that there's a pending vacancy. Should notice be given, the plan provides that the executive director, once the notice is given, the board can consider making the deputy executive director the interim director and provide additional pay for the additional responsibilities if it goes on for some period of time. And then the third step is appointment of a search committee by the chair. This could either be the ASC or an ad hoc committee established by the board to go out and recommend a executive search firm and to go through the process, review the job descriptions and that kind of thing. So the committee's duties, once they're appointed by the chair, they're going to figure out whether you want a national, regional, or local search and make a recommendation to the board. They'll review the job description again, make any changes, recommend any changes, and then once the job description and draft position description have been finalized, the committee will issue a request for proposals. Again, we've come up with a draft for that for the executive search services, and the committee will evaluate the responses in conjunction with the executive search firm on anyone who applies for the job. No, I'm sorry, they'll recommend an executive search firm. They'll evaluate those proposals. And then on the next step, once the board approves the selected executive search firms, maybe as recommended by the committee, then the committee can interview potential candidates that come out of that search, and the committee can make a hiring recommendation to the board at that point. And then on the 7th step, once the committee has made any hiring recommendation, the board can interview candidates. Once the board has established a preferred candidate or candidates, then the board would authorize contract negotiations with a successful candidate. And if a candidate doesn't want to sign the contract or you can't come to a conclusion, you can either go out for another search or you sign that contract with the selected or preferred candidates. And so again, we'll work with the search firm and make sure that all of these steps happen. And I think this is probably an efficient approach. It involves either an ad hoc committee or the ASC. The ASC is familiar with the succession plan at this point. Again, it's a plan, it can be changed by you at any time, but it will provide for a lot of responsibility with that ad hoc committee the way that it's designed. Again, another feature, depending on the notice that's provided, you may not have to have your interim declared. I mean, that's all fact-oriented, depending on the situation. But I think it's a good plan as it's drafted. Of course, it can be changed by you at any time. It's your plan. But that's what's being recommended. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any comments from the committee?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to thank the committee for working on this. I know it's been a goal of the board for years, pre-COVID for sure, and we formalized it in the succession plan. So I feel much more comfortable with all the responsibility that Mr. Ash has and the services he provides to the plan. It's really nice to know that we at least have something in place for a orderly transition whenever that occasion arises.
A peaceful and orderly
hopefully
transition.
years down the road. Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Great presentation, because we had it in paper. It would have been very boring. This was great.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ash.
And thank you, everyone.
It is a good plan.
And I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So I move to adopt the proposed succession plan as recommended by the Administrative Services Committee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Carl, seconded by Representative Molinar. Do we need to poll, Mr. Ash? Poll?
I don't think you need to.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 14, discussion and action regarding the approval and amendment to the job description of the Executive Director / Legal Advisor.
Robert Ash, Executive Director, Legal Advisor. The item before you now is a result of the ASC looking at the succession plan and reviewing the current job description for the Executive Director. In reviewing it, this had been reviewed by CBIZ, who did our class and comp study when they did their work a couple years ago, but we noticed there was one element that we thought was missing that should be added, and that's supervisory experience. And so the ASC, when they reviewed the job description, very astutely decided that we probably ought to add some supervisory experience since we have a staff of people. And so they are recommending 7-year supervisory experience managing and directing staff employees. And so that's will be one of the minimum requirements going forward for the position if you approve this. And I think that's reasonable. I think the ASC has recommended that amendment.
Well, this wasn't here before. You didn't have any supervisory experience?
So when I first started, I think there was 5 years experience. For somehow, I think when CBIZ went back and redid the job descriptions, it was left out. But we think 7 years is probably appropriate.
Any comments from the committee?
It sets a high bar.
It is a high position.
It should.
Well, it needs to be a high bar, I would say.
I only know one person that can fill it.
There you go.
Well, that's
Thank
why
you,
we'll have to
everyone.
engage a search firm. Okay. Yes, thank you again to the committee for all their work on this. It really needed to get done, so thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
So I move to approve the revised job description as recommended by the ASC.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Carl, seconded by Ms. Nunez. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm
Aye.
sorry. That was seconded by Representative Salcido. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 15, discussion and action regarding the approval of a disability application policy.
Mr. Sanchez.
Good
morning.
Giving Robert a break.
Yeah. All right, good morning, board. So before you have just a brief presentation on the disability application policy. This is in line with our strategic plan. It falls under the exceptional service part of our strategic plan within the strategies of success to identify behaviors that align to each of the core values and use the behaviors to set clear expectations for all staff for exceptional service. So I'm just gonna go over for the public's knowledge the disability retirement. So as you see on your agenda, we have typically you'll hear a regular retirement, and then you'll sometimes hear early retirements. The third option for participants is a disability retirement. Now, of course, this has circumstances tied to it that are different from a typical retirement. We do offer two different types of disability retirements. We have a job-related disability and a non-job related disability. And so those are pretty self-explanatory. A job-related disability is something that happens to a person while they're on the job, whether, I don't know, somebody working at Sun Metro that has an accident, something like that. A non-job related disability is something that, just happens. It could be some sort of illness that takes place. Doesn't have to be physical, it could be mental. And there's different standards for each of those. So a job-related disability, there's no minimum age, and the benefit is based on the pension service credit, and there's a minimum of $250 per month that a participant can earn. Non-job related disability, again, there's no minimum age, but this one does require that you have served 7 years within the pension fund. It is a strong standard when it comes to disability retirement. You must be totally and permanently disabled from your job or any other job for which you're qualified. It's a very, very detail-oriented process to apply for a disability. They don't happen very frequently. And I have some stats just to show you kind of the infrequency for which they happen. We currently have 3,700 retirees in pay. Of those 3,700 retirees, 53 are disability retirements. The last time that there was a disability retirement approved by the board was September 2016. So they don't happen very frequently, and which makes it more difficult when they actually do come up to the board. So as of right now, we don't have a policy when it comes to disabilities. We have a process that we follow, and so that's what we're trying to take care of. So as of right now, there's no formal policy. Staff takes care, and Alma and her group are mainly the ones that have to deal with the disability retirements. It's a very tedious process of getting the applicants' medical information, dealing with doctors, and all types of things like that. The process can extend months, years. There's really no set timeline on how long it might take, depending on how frequently these people show up to bring a document. That might reset the time, and this could go out for a long period of time. The way that that the current process exists, in order for the board to get an IME from the participant, from the applicant, it currently takes the request of the full board to do that. So in that, they have to come up on the agenda, meet with you all, and you all have to send them back saying that you'd like further medical evidence, which just prolongs the process even further. So the goals of creating an actual policy are provide for a more efficient and administratively complete process. Again, and this exists as it is, ensure due process for the applicant. You'll see as I go through this that it's going to clearly define the role of the ASC. And the intent is to present a more complete and well-vetted application to the board when it comes to all of you at once.
And as always, we need to maintain compliance with the El Paso Municipal Code. So here's the application process. I'm going to look at them from my screen so I don't struggle looking up there. So there's really 3 stages. So the first part is going to be when the applicant notifies the trust that they want to apply for a disability. The benefits manager will determine when that application is administratively complete. They'll set deadlines to by procedure, and which will still be another step after we approve this policy. They'll work with this applicant, make sure that they follow the guidelines and get them the application materials within a certain timeline. Once the benefits manager deems that they have what they need to take the application to the ASC, we move on to step 2. The trust staff will notify the ASC chair in order to schedule a committee meeting to review the application. The applicant will be invited to discuss with the committee. So this is a little different than what we do now. Instead of the applicant coming in addressing the full board, initially they'll address the ASC if they'd like. The ASC will then have the authority to, 1, recommend approval, or they can request an IME, or request denial, and then, or maybe they send the applicant back and just ask for further medical information. Stage 2 is complete when the ASC has a recommendation for the board. So say for example they request further information or request an IME, then we'll repeat step 2 until they get to the process where they think that they have a recommendation for the full board. Stage 3 begins when that recommendation is ready. The applicant will again be invited to address the full board at this time. The recommendation and medical data will be considered by the board in executive session unless the applicant desires to be heard in open session. The board shall take action in accordance with the El Paso Municipal Code, and an action made by the board regarding an application shall be considered final. So that's kind of the process as outlined in the new policy. This has been a very long process, so I've been here for a few years. We've been working on this and met with ASC over the last few years, and as I understand, this process has existed since before I started as well. So thank you to all the ASC members that were part of all those meetings. At this point, the ASC does recommend approval of this application disability policy, and depending on the approval of the policy, the staff will create procedures to comply with the policy. Take any questions?
I have
Thank you, Adrian.
Sure.
So there's a possibility that sometimes an application could be stuck in ASC for in the committee for an extended period of time in limbo until it gets approved. Is there, and if it doesn't get approved, is there an appeal process incorporated in that?
Well, I don't think there's a approval. It's the
ASC
has a
to move it forward
recommendation.
to the board. It could be stuck in limbo.
So I don't think we touched on it in the overview, but the procedure would follow, and it would set deadlines so that specifically something wouldn't last in limbo. It would say if it's not resolved within 60 days or 90 days, then it's canceled, and then it starts over if the process isn't resolved. Because right now we do have cases.
Is there something in writing that says that they can reapply?
I think it could be in the procedure, right, Robert?
So first of all, the ASC can only make a recommendation to the board.
Right.
The board still has to approve or deny. So we're not delegating the authority to grant or deny disability retirements to the committee. It's somewhat like, and you may remember because you've been here for a few years, the board used to have a disability committee. And that committee would hear the disability cases and make recommendations to the board. That committee disbanded because we couldn't get people to show up to the disability committee. It's one of the toughest things you guys have to do. But the committee can only make a recommendation to the board. We're not delegating the committee at this point with the authority to approve or deny a disability application.
But if,
And
but
at
if
that
an app-
level, there's an appeal process, right?
Correct.
The board,
So
is that
if the
remains-
committee were to recommend denial, it'll be heard by the full board, and then the full board can overrule the committee and still approve the application.
But to Mario's question, if an application is canceled due to exceeding that time frame, there's nothing prohibiting the applicant from reapplying, starting over, correct?
Right. So typically what would happen in the procedures, and we're not approving procedures at this point, the disability policy does require any procedures that the staff comes up with to be approved by the committee. But in those procedures, there'll probably be a cancellation after a certain number of days that the applicant hasn't done anything, but it doesn't keep them from reapplying. At least that's how I envision the procedures for another disability application. But we need some finality. We've had disability applications go on for years. And just not through any fault of the staff, the applicant hasn't delivered documents, medical evidence to support their case. And so we'd like procedures that informs the applicants, hey, you need to do this by a certain date, otherwise we'll consider it canceled. So they know the burden. The burden by ordinance is on the applicant, it's not on the board to provide this evidence. But it does vest the committee with some authority to go ahead and authorize IMEs, and we pay for IMEs, independent medical examinations.
So the reapplication is implied?
It'll be in the procedures. We'll put in the procedures that you have a certain number of days to complete your application, and if it's not, it'll be canceled, but we'll put in there, but you can reapply if you exceed those days.
The policy requires a cancellation notice, so to your point, Mario, I think they can include that statement in the notification. You're welcome to reapply at a future date.
Right, I think I would appreciate that only, for the situation, and, some people say it's just thinking as a final determination.
Yeah.
So the board's decision is final. It doesn't go back to the committee or anything else.
We're talking the application.
Okay.
We're talking about the application and being, being before the ASC.
Stage 1 or 2.
Not the board decision.
Okay.
There is a segment there where we mentioned, you have to, did we mention dates? No, I don't think so, right? We said in the policy.
The procedure. The policy requires me to send a notice, but the procedure will set the time.
And then I'd also
Just
say,
that.
would say that the procedure should give the ASC the flexibility to perhaps extend the timeline, the deadlines,
That's a good point.
if there are facts that warrant it.
I think I'd agree with that. I think that would be fair.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And there is a section there, if I recall correctly, where the trust is responsible for letting them know that their application did not go through because they didn't file within whatever number of days, and then we can add that. It does not prohibit you from reapplying at a future date.
Right, yeah, we didn't have reapplication in there, but the first part of it was that there. I think it was staff that's.
That we need to send them a letter
Yes.
telling them that.
Yes, it's staff that.
We just added.
So we'll be sharing our procedures, agents developing procedures now, along with Ms. Duenas. We'll share that with the ASC. They'll approve those procedures rather than go to the board. And make sure everyone's on the same page as far as expectations going forward.
How long after we approve this do you think the policy will be rewritten?
So this is the policy. The procedures maybe is what you're requesting. Adrian, do you have a feel for that?
I don't know. We'll start working. Right now we have all the audit and actuary stuff, but
will it take after April?
I'll try and get it to you guys before the April date. Yes.
Before April.
Right.
Something happening in April, Marty?
Yes. I won't be here.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board?
And thanks again to them.
Yes, thanks again to the committee. A lot of work from the committee for this meeting, so thank you all.
Okay, well, I move to approve the disability application policy as recommended by the Admin Services Committee.
Second.
So we have a motion made by Carl, seconded by Representative Molinar. This motion does require polling. Ms. Valdez?
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez?
No, not until I hear that, with the motion, I would have approved, I appreciate it if they would have said with the recommendations that we had
As
discussed.
revised.
Mhm.
Ms. Nunez?
Aye.
Mrs. Hamlin?
Aye.
Mr. Remkes?
Aye.
Representative Molinar?
Aye.
And Representative Salcido?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 16, discussion and action regarding a report from the Executive Director, including a synopsis of the committee meetings.
Robert Ash, Executive Director, Legal Advisor. As you heard, Administrative Services Committee was very busy in the last month, and they met on November 18th, and they reviewed the draft technology reimbursement policy and recommended some minor revisions to it. Committee also reviewed the draft succession plan for the position of Executive Director, Legal Advisor. They reviewed the job description and an RFP for the Executive Search Services. And they believe those documents were needed for plan implementation. And so they made some recommendations there. Eventually they recommended, after reviewing all those documents, that it go to the board for possible approval. They also discussed the draft disability policy, and they understood that that would authorize the ASC to take certain actions, such as requesting an IME, and have the authority to review disability applications before they went to the board for a recommendation. And finally, they discussed the upcoming employee election for board positions, and an update is coming at a future meeting. The Executive Committee met on December 7th. They discussed items that might be placed on the December board meeting, and the committee also discussed current staff work assignments and progress being made towards those work assignments. Our office will be closed the last week of this month. As the city closes their offices, our offices will be closed from December 26th through January 2nd. We'll post notices. The December pension payroll will be paid on the 30th. And so we're working diligently to get that done. We don't have a lot of time since we won't be here the last week of the month. And we'll work with IT and OTC to make sure that that happens. The Financial Oversight Committee will need to meet within the next month or so. We expect to have the audit and the actual evaluation completed by our January board meeting. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure we have a presentation in January. We expect a draft evaluation report in the next week or so. And so we expect that'll happen before the end of the year. The auditors need the draft report to finish their work. They were in doing field work the last couple weeks, 1 week at the city and 1 week here at the office, the pension office. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays, and again, thank you for all your committee work. As you've seen, the investment committee works very diligently, and the ASC and the FOC is going to really come into play in the next couple months. We've got some important reports that are due in regarding our funded position and the audit, and so it'll be a busy end of December and January for the staff. So again, thank you for all your help throughout the year, and wish you happy holidays.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, brings us to item 17 for notation only. Open comment period. We have no one signed up for the open comment period. Brings us to adjournment. Any motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion by Representative Salcido and Representative Molinar to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned as of 10:38 a.m.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.